Welcome to The Critique. Today we're looking at a commentary on an influencer's second, more private podcast response to some very serious allegations.
And it specifically notes how the timing of all this just happens to coincide with a big live tour announcement.
Exactly. So let's jump right in.
Okay.
So a really strong theme in this is how fast and how accurately the host just nails the core strategy.
You mean the financial pressure?
Yes, the financial pressure that's clearly underneath what's supposed to look like a sincere apology to it. But that sharp analysis needs to be protected, which brings us to our first point.
Right.
The juxtaposition of this really serious accusatory analysis with a very detailed, almost casual product endorsement, it completely undermines the material's authority and emotion.
Okay, so let's break that down.
The weakness is that the material sets the stakes incredibly high right from the start. The opening is powerful, It's talking about heinous things an influencer could be exposed.
And it immediately brings up that first response, the one everyone agrees was just the worst possible way to handle it.
Exactly. So the tension is there. The listener is totally primed for this investigative deep dive.
And then the floor just drops out from under you. After setting up this whole narrative that this second podcast is just a strategic move to sell tickets. We get this abrupt pivot into a super long, really descriptive sponsor read for Exta.
Yeah, and suddenly we're pulled from analyzing these, high-stakes allegations to hearing about the specific features of an AirTag smart card holder.
And the recycled aluminum in the Pro version, the travel pack vacuum kit. Even Christmas gift ideas.
It's a complete jarring whiplash. The host's voice, it just shifts entirely from this skeptical investigator to a really enthusiastic conversational sales rep.
It's a tonal U-turn.
It is. And you're asking the listener to go from focusing on PR malpractice and moral failure to thinking about what their wallet is made of. It's damaging when you've built your authority on being serious and holding people accountable.
That's very clear. I do wonder, though, the host might feel they have to give the sponsor a certain amount of time, right? That's just the reality of producing content.
Oh, absolutely. But the key is that the necessary commercial break has to be strategically located to protect the store. The suggestion here is to maximize impact by streamlining or just relocating that whole segment.
So the listener is there for the expose, not the ads.
Right. They tolerate the ad. Can't confuse those priorities. So for a concrete example, the easiest fix is just a pacing adjustment.
Okay.
Instead of putting that full multi-minute sponsor read right in the middle of everything, just move it. Put it at the end of the initial setup, before the deep dive into the second podcast even begins.
So you create a clean break. You have the expose setup and then the expose deep dive.
Precisely. It gives the listener a natural pause point.
Okay, but let's say for whatever reason, maybe contractually, it has to stay in the middle. What then?
Then the suggestion is all about tonal consistency. The host has to be ruthless and cut down those super specific, enthusiastic descriptions.
So less detail.
Way less. Just reduce it to a rapid, high-level thank you and a mention of the code. You don't need to explain how the AirTag holder works or the exact recycled content.
Right, because that level of detail forces you to disengage from the main story.
It does. A quick, authoritative thank you lets the host get right back to the high-stakes narrative without losing that momentum. And, crucially, without losing that serious, skeptical voice they've worked so hard to establish.
The voice of accountability has to be consistent, even when you're talking about travel packs.
Yes, and that idea of serving the central argument at all times, that brings us right to the next critical area, which is the material's tone and its analytical authority.
Okay.
So the powerful moral clarity of the argument could be so much stronger if some of the highly emotional and colloquial interjections were replaced with more measured, analytical language.
Right, so the host has this really strong conviction, which is a good thing.
It's a strength, for sure, but it comes out in these really dismissive, frustrated phrases. We hear things like, the situation is just so dramatic, or that the subject's arguments are a load of bollocks.
Or even calling the subject a disaster crybaby. I remember that. The host even says they worry about being called snarky, but that it feels actually pretty fair.
Exact. And the weakness here is that this kind of emotional language, especially these dismissal, can be so easily weaponized against the critique itself.
It risks validating the subject's own story.
That's it. Her narrative is that she's being subjected to mass hate.
Charged insults, it just plays right into her hands.
It does. It gives her a soundbite she can use to dismiss the entire analysis as, pure, irrational hatred. And that risks alienating neutral listeners who want a purely rational, evidence-based takedown.
I see. But is there a risk that if you go too far the other way, too analytical, that it becomes, dry or academic? The passion is what makes it so engaging.
Yeah, and you don't want to lose that. The key is balance. You maintain the skepticism, you maintain the passion, but you elevate the language so the critique can't be dismissed as just a personal attack.
So the passion comes through the rigor of the argument itself.
Yes, the argument needs to stand on the strength of its logic, not the strength of its anger.
Okay, so let's apply that. There's that moment where the subject claims she's just trying to survive. A huge play for sympathy. How do you critique that without just calling it dramatic?
You reframe it. You focus on privilege, on context. Instead of just reacting emotionally, you analyze the strategy of the statement.
So, a concrete example?
You could say something like this. This portrayal of hardship is strategically disingenuous, considering the subject's established financial and platform resources. It actively downplays the seriousness of the underlying allegations.
Wow. Yeah, that is so much stronger. It's just as damning, but it uses logic to deliver the blow.
Exactly. It attacks the action, not the actor's emotional state.
And we could do the same for that other big moment, right? The repeated use of the child as a shield. The material correctly points out it's the same strategy from 2020.
Yeah. And instead of saying something like, it is genuinely so embarrassing, which is very emotional, you can just substitute it with an objective statement.
Something like,
The repeated use of the child as a shield undermines any claim of sincere accountability. It deploys a specific manipulation tactic that prioritizes manufactured sympathy over addressing the actual evidence.
it makes the critique feel like it's coming from an intellectual high ground, not a personal vendetta. It's much harder to dismiss that as just, internet hate.
And that intellectual high ground is crucial. It has to anchor our final point, which is all about the angle and focus.
Okay.
The material really needs to consistently use its central investigative angle, that financial motive, to frame every single piece of evidence it refutes.
The initial thesis is fantastic.
It's phenomenal. It connects the 2 podcast appearances directly to this upcoming live charity tour. The tickets are what, $50 to $80?
Yeah, something like that. So the financial incentive is the why behind everything.
It should be. But as the analysis goes on, that strong anchor gets a bit diluted. The material starts chasing every rabbit down every hole.
Right, it gets into this extensive chronological rebuttal of every single quote. The denial of being manipulative, the whole ukulele video explanation, that bizarre Peter Pan analogy.
And the core focus just gets lost. It starts to feel more like a general reaction video than a focused expose on PR strategy. The person who submitted this even notes their own confusion about why the subject is doing any of it.
That confusion is the key, isn't it? That was the moment to bring it back.
Yes, that was the moment to explicitly restate the financial motive. She's not doing this to win back the masses. She's doing it to mobilize the specific, dedicated base who will buy those $80 tickets.
Okay, but just to play devil's advocate, is there a risk that if you filter every single quote through the lens of ticket sales, it could get a bit repetitive?
I don't think so, not if it's handled right. The financial motive isn't just for repetition. It's the continuous, so what? It's the interpretive lens. If she says X, the question is always, how does statement X help sell tickets for the tour?
It has to be the dominant frame.
It does. Let's take the most bizarre part, the Peter Pan and Hook analogy. The subject sees herself as Peter Pan saving her kids from Hook, who is the internet.
As a standalone comment, it's just weird.
It's just odd. But when you analyze it through that financial lens, it becomes really potent. We need to explicitly anchor that delusion back to the tour. The refinement would sound something like this. This self-styled hero narrative is structurally necessary to secure the trust of her dedicated Patreon audience.
Assuring them they are supporting a survivor worthy of purchasing tickets to the upcoming charity show.
Exactly. Suddenly, the purpose of the delusion is revealed to be profit.
That reframes it completely. It's not a psychological quirk. It's a calculated marketing ploy.
And you see the same opportunity when she tries to shift blame for the ukulele video. She says, I listened to what other people said, or they told me, no, you cannot do that.
Which, presented chronologically, just sounds like a weak excuse.
Right, but through the financial lens, it's a necessary maneuver. This blame shifting serves a distinct function. It minimizes her personal culpability right before the tour. It creates a clean narrative break.
So the audience is meant to believe she's now free from bad advice and is finally delivering her truth.
Which creates an emotionally safe path for them to financially support her big comeback on stage. By making that connection explicit, the material elevates itself from just dissecting quotes to deconstructing a whole crisis PR campaign designed for monetization.
That shift in focus really does transform the whole critique. You're not just reacting to the absurdity, you're revealing the mechanism of the absurdity. Connecting every plea, every denial, and every weird analogy back to the simple logistical need to sell seats.
It gives the material that sharp, creative focus it needs to be a truly investigative piece of commentary.
Absolutely. So, to sort of wrap up, we focus today on 3 critical areas. First, protecting that core critique from tonal disruptions by either moving or just streamlining that sponsor segment. Second, elevating the host's language to strengthen that analytical authority and, prevent the critique from being dismissed as just emotional anger.
And finally, maintaining that razor-sharp focus on the central investigative thesis, the financial motivation tied to the tour, and using that to frame every single piece of evidence.
So the actionable steps for the listener are pretty straightforward. First, review the pacing around that sponsor break.
Immediately.
Then, assess the points where that highly charged language can be swapped for more analytical rigor. And most importantly, use the tour and the need for ticket sales as the continuous structural anchor for every manipulative statement.
We look forward to seeing how these high-level editorial improvements refine the material in the future. We invite you to submit your work back in for another critique.